Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy, and oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. Welcome back to a brand new episode from Time to Teach. Not only is this a brand new episode, but this is now a brand new series. I'm so excited to introduce to you Series 4, Classroom Climate. Now, this series has really grown from episode 15, which was the last episode of Series 3. Series 3 was back to school. And in that last episode, and I will add links in the show notes for anyone who might have missed it. Of course, if you're subscribed, just can go back into your podcast catcher. But that episode 15, I really talked a lot about the classroom behavior management, and you know what, it was an episode that for me was very much a reflection, and not even so much a reflection as it was kind of working through my own personal crossroads with behavior management. I don't have behavior management issues. So that's not what the issue was. It was basically wanting to move away from the stoplight system that I've been using. Really wanting to just focus on what I feel I've been focusing on, which is just really logical and natural consequences, working with students, trying to understand their behaviors. And because of that, I would rather focus on that than an actual stoplight system that announces the colors where everyone is and causing, not intentionally, but causing students to potentially, feel hurt or humiliated because their colors are on display for everyone. So I really, even though I've planned out the entire year of my podcasting in this series, what I found that's what has happened is that some things kind of naturally take on life and naturally grow out of the content. So what I'm doing is I pushed back what I initially had planned for this month and wanted to really tackle classroom climate because I thought this is really what I'm talking about, and this is something that is of utmost importance in every classroom. So there's a backstory on this series, Series 4, Classroom Climate. If you did catch the last episode, yes, I'm still sick. I am still sick, and that's partly because I'm really only just recording a day after my last recording. So even though you might be hearing this a week later, this is now Saturday. I did my episode 15 recording on Thursday and Friday, and I'm starting this new episode on Saturday, although it will not launch until, or will not be published until next week on Sunday. So that's why I'm still sick, because in actuality there hasn't been a whole lot of time that has passed in between the two episodes. So I'm really excited about this brand new series because Classroom Climate, I want to explain a few things. Classroom Climate is actually a passion of mine. I feel like as an educator, I'm so passionate about so many things, and it's really hard. I guess actually they're all really, much of them are very interrelated because, when I entered the educational field, I entered it for very different reasons than why I'm still in education. So when I entered in the field of education, it was because ever since I could fathom the idea of you work and do something with your life when you're older. Teaching is all I've ever wanted to do. That's what I always said I wanted to do. Now, when I was very little and first had the idea of being a teacher, it was because teaching seemed so fun. It just seemed like I would have a ball with teaching. So that's why I decided on being a teacher when I was younger. And then I just really, that idea of wanting to teach stayed with me. I mean, it's just what I've always wanted. I don't think as I was growing up, I really put too much thought into why I wanted to be a teacher, but it just seemed like I would really enjoy that. And then, of course, when you go to teachers' college, they have you come up with your educational theories, and that's all fun because you have no idea really about it. Like, what kind of theory could there be? What is my philosophy? I don't really know. Philosophy, actually, more than theory. But, I guess in college, I still really couldn't tell you what my philosophy was. I don't really think you can know those things until you get into education, and I guess it's hard, and I guess that's why some people get into education and then decide, oh wait, this is not quite for me, because there's so much in education. So now really I'm in it because I really feel like this career is making a difference. It is making a difference in the world, and that's what I want to do. I want to be part of something that makes this world a better place. I've mentioned this before in previous episodes, and I've mentioned the fact that I know that is cheesy, but that's truly why I am in the field of education. So take it for whatever you will. That is why I'm in education. I do feel like what we do as educators is very impactful. I even remember once a teacher saying to me, "Oh, I'm just a teacher." She was talking about herself, not me. But she said, "Oh, but I'm just a teacher." She was talking about her husband, or no, her boyfriend, who was an engineer, I want to say, I don't know. And then comparing herself to him and saying, "Oh, but I'm just a teacher." And I said, "Whoa, wait, stop right there. Do not minimize the effect that we have as teachers." I mean, we have, because of the amount of contact time that we have with students, we also have a lot of influence on these students. So we are in a very unique position where we can positively influence. Well, we can also negatively influence them. Hopefully that's not what we're doing. I think most of us as teachers, that's not what we are doing. But, we have the potential to positively influence them and impact them, so that, those influences and those impacts are going to help them as they go through the world, and, hopefully will do good in the world. So, yeah, I don't think of us as just teachers. I think of this career as, those relationships that we're building with students, and it's so powerful because of really the implications that it has for what those students can then do and carry on in the world. And maybe it won't be until they get older, or maybe it will be now, because as I always tell my students, just because they're young doesn't mean that they can't make a difference now. Even at age 5, even at age 6, there are things that they can do. And of course, we talk about those things. So, yeah, so now I am in the field of education because I really want to make the world a better place through my teaching. And then, so of course for me, then the biggest part of being a teacher is really the relationships. So the relationships, one, that I develop with the students, and then I think, of course, that's also an extension of the relationships that I make with the parents, which I would argue is very vital. And I know that it's a delicate balance, and it can be very very challenging and difficult. Parents are people, so as such, we're going to run into different kinds of parents, and that's what we have to work with. But I really do believe in trying to develop those relationships, because for me, those are the most important parts. It's the relationship piece, and that's how you can really have a positive impact and influence, because you have to have that relationship. So I really wanted to talk a little bit about that on today's episode. Well, kind of about that. Is actually what I want to talk about is how we create that positive classroom climate. And the whole point of me discussing the fact that this is one of my passions is to let you know that that's also what I was very interested in when I went through my master's and got a master's in teaching. So my area of research was how to create a positive classroom climate, especially when you're working in a very challenging student population. Now, of course, right now I am not working with a very challenging student population. I'm actually working in a very affluent student population for the most part. I've mentioned this many times, but this is I am working and living down in Mexico, and the school where I teach in is a private school, and yes, it is a very affluent population in which I'm working with. But where I grew up and where I obtained my credential, the districts really in that area were very challenging ones, very, very challenging ones. So that's where I really grew an interest in, believing that was going to be the student population I was likely going to be working with. My interest just became, how do I create a positive classroom climate with my most challenging students and the most challenging student population that you can imagine. So I put together a couple years ago, many years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, I don't remember, but I put together a presentation to share with the school where I was at the time, not my current one, and to kind of discuss classroom climate, because I had just finished my master's program at that time. So we thought it would be really good if I could share some of that information. So I am going to share that on today's episode. And in all honesty, when I gave this presentation, I believe it was several hours long. So this could end up being split. I don't know how much summarizing I'll do. I mean, I know I'll be doing a lot of summarizing. I just don't know how quickly I'll be able to do it. So I'm going to see where this takes me. And if I need to break this up, this might be part one, and we might have to make a part two of it. I don't think we'll need to take longer than part two, but we'll see wherever this takes us. That's where we're going to go. So I'd like to really start talking about classroom climate by defining classroom climate. And you can look online and you can get probably a half a dozen, maybe even a dozen different explanations. But I chose ones for my presentation that I'm going to stick with. And just so you know, in the show notes, I will include a link to this presentation. So everything that I'm quoting, you can check the references. I have everything linked in there inside the presentation. But here's the definition that I found from Matsumuro, and I could be totally butchering that name, probably am, Slater and Crossan from 2008 source. And the definition of classroom climate: the quality of children's life in schools and classrooms apart from the rigor of instruction and curricula. So as you can see, when we're talking about classroom climate, we're separating it out of instruction and outside of the curricula that's happening. This is really, when we get to the nitty-gritty of it, it's really the emotions and feelings. And to help us think about this, if you think about a time in your career, imagine yourself at a school, or I suppose if you're not yet teaching, in another workplace or space, or even at a school, I want you to think about a job or classroom where you were completely comfortable in, you felt welcomed in there, you felt like you fit in, and then I'd like you to juxtapose that against another job or classroom or some type of work experience where maybe tensions were high for whatever reasons. Maybe you didn't fit in for whatever reason. Maybe you just didn't quite find a friendship. Maybe you were experiencing tension with co-workers, or whatever the case might be. If you think about those different kinds of experiences, that kind of gets to the heart of what climate is, because it's involving your emotions and it's affecting you on a daily basis. If you're going into your workplace and you're feeling really good, your connections are good, the environment physically itself can be good, although this is more climate where we're talking about emotional, but that sometimes the environment can actually have effect on the emotions and how much we enjoy it. But if you juxtapose those two, the place where you felt good is probably the place where you're going to thrive. That's just how it is. So you're going to have fonder memories of that, obviously. And so that's what we mean. We're talking about the classroom climate. It's strictly those emotions, and it's the day-to-day life, it's the interactions, it's all of that. Now, what I'm going to talk about in today's episode, I am pulling from information from my own scholarly research that I conducted. I did active research when I went through my master's program. Boy, this seems like a lifetime ago. Maybe back in 2007, can't quite remember. But, and then, so my own research and also my reading of research. So the reading of the literature that is out there on classroom climate. So that's where I'm getting my information on. So if we just really focus on why does classroom climate even matter? Why am I concerned with it? Well, I'm really concerned about it, and those who look at this are really concerned because until there are feelings of being safe and secure, learning just cannot happen. It just cannot happen, period. So that is why classroom climate matters. That is why we need to look at it and we need to think about it. So the first thing I want to talk about is mutual respect. Mutual respect is so important, and I mean in terms of the teacher and the student. So the teacher should respect the student should respect the teacher, and likewise, students should respect the other students. And this is true because negative experiences are going to be transferred over. So if I have a negative experience in, let's say, kindergarten, when I go into first grade, what do you think is going to happen? I am going to carry in those negative experiences. It gets transferred over. It's not like, okay, I had a year of negative experiences, so now I'm going to enter into first grade with a whole new slate and I start positive. No, I'm actually going to carry that over. Likewise, if I have positive experiences, I'm going to carry those positive experiences over. So whatever experiences we're helping to establish is super important because we know that that's going to be carried over. Now, going back to the research from Matsumura, Slater, and Crossan, there is a correlation between teacher respect and peer respect when we start looking at the climate. So there's a reciprocation of teacher behavior. Okay, this is really, really huge. What the behavior of the teacher is going to be mimicked by the students. So if I'm sarcastic with my students, if I'm belittling towards my students, that same behavior is going to be picked up by other students. So it becomes the norm in the classroom. Likewise, if I, as a teacher, put an end to any, laughing of students, from any negativity from students, and I don't engage in that myself, that is also what is going to be mimicked by other students. Okay, and that's also what is going to help to set your norms for the class. This is what I expect. This is how we treat each other. There's no option, and that's what kids are going to pick up on. Looking at academic efficacy, so this is something that is huge when we look at what do students achieve academically in different kinds of environments. So there is the belief that one can achieve a learning goal, and if someone believes that they can achieve a learning goal, like I can achieve this, then there's going to be self-regulation of their schoolwork. So if I believe it's attainable, I'm going to work towards it. Whereas if I believe I don't have this ability, it's not attainable, it is out of my hands, I absolutely am not going to even work towards this goal. So the implication of that is, again, really need to establish a growth mindset with our students. And this is going to help to really promote a positive classroom climate. So if students believe that they can improve and they can get better, you're going to see them self-regulating themselves. And of course, if they're focused on their work, you're probably also going to experience fewer behavior problems because they're really working towards this bigger goal, which is learning, and growing in their abilities. Okay, a higher sense of class belonging. When we have a positive classroom climate, students feel like I have a place where I belong. This is my classroom. This is my place, and I feel very good in my place. So to do that, we really must look at how we can promote mutual respect from all parties involved. So again, it's going to come down to building relationships. Again, this is just what I'm finding is really the meat of everything. So promoting mutual respect, the first thing you need to do is you really need to get to know your students, get to know who they are, get to know their likes and dislikes. I feel like when in maybe my first few years of teaching, it took me a long time to get to know them. I guess because partly I didn't know how, and I maybe didn't engage with them in the same ways that I would now to purposely build those relationships. So I would always feel like it took me a while to really get to know my students. But I just go in now on day one and I start talking to the kids, and like their very first day they come in, they sit down, they get started in an activity because they have to, I don't just bring them on the carpet the first day as soon as they get in, because they need a little bit of time. It's really hard for them. Some of them are emotional, so I have to let them kind of ease in to the morning, and then we can get started with talking about the class and everything. But as they're sitting down, I take that as an opportunity to go around and say hello to each and every one of them. Tell them that I'm so excited that we're going to be working together this year. So really search from day one. Also, you want to prove yourself to be a trustworthy person. You want to show that, if something happens, you're going to listen to them. I would say try to refrain from being reactive, which I have definitely been guilty of myself, but I really try not to be. So we want to not be reactive. We want to listen. We want to see what's going on. I know sometimes it's very easy to just quickly react and say, okay, move your clip down, or okay, this, okay, that. And, also partly because we are trying to also teach as these things come up. So it's very, very difficult to juggle all of that. But, sometimes we have to kind of investigate what happened in the behavior. Why did it happen? I'm going to mention that I had something just this week come up where it involved inappropriate behavior, and I felt like it was an incident where I could have very easily reacted to it and easily, gone to the most severest consequence, and I probably would have been justified in that in terms of the action itself. However, I am still actually currently investigating exactly what happened, because since it happened not in my classroom but in an activity classroom, I want to find out what provoked this behavior, what action caused the behavior, because certainly something happened prior to this. It didn't just, it wasn't just this action and nothing happened prior to it. So I'm trying to investigate and find out, and I do feel strongly that, we want to get down to the matter of where is this behavior stemming from, and really listen to students about it, because I've had so many times where I initially think that something happened that it didn't happen, or I misunderstand a situation because I didn't see what happened beforehand. Maybe I only saw the last part of the incident, and so I misread it and I misunderstand it. And if I didn't stop to listen to the child, or I didn't stop to really investigate it, it would have been really easy to jump to the most severest of consequences. Again, which maybe just looking at the action itself could be justified, but when we want to really get to the heart of what happened, you do have to spend a little bit of time. Other ways to establish trust is not to engage in arguments. This can definitely be something at the older grades where I know students can just kind of keep going, and they don't want to lose face, and they especially don't want to lose face in front of their peers. So I would say be the bigger person. Don't get into a power struggle with the students. Just don't even engage in that, because it's setting the student up. The student is not going to let down when it's an older student. You'll have more leverage if it's a younger student, but older students, secondary level, they can't let up, because they'll lose face. And then so that puts really the student at the disadvantage. So don't do it. It's not fair to the student who's kind of stuck in this position. And this would happen if there was an incident that occurred between the teacher and the student in front of others. So just don't even go there. Don't engage in it. Just be the bigger person, and don't engage in those arguments, and don't get in a power struggle. I think that's so destructive. Okay, so a few other things that we can do to establish mutual respect is to really encourage them as they, encounter challenges. You want to validate that those challenges are good for them. You want to validate their hard work and their efforts and encourage them in terms of what they're working towards. And as always, give students choices. I know that sometimes as teachers it's hard to give up the reins. And actually, when you give choices, I find it's really not giving up the reins. Yes, I guess in some sense, yeah, because I'm not controlling every single thing, but I give up the reins and I get so much more out of it because honestly, when students can have some say in the matter, they're going to enjoy whatever activity it is that you're doing. And, because they enjoy it more, they are going to get so much more out of it. So the learning is going to increase, and that is huge. So let's give our students choice and let's be brave. Let us be willing to give up a little bit of control for the better of our students. Okay, so I'd like to focus a little bit on deliberate trusting relationships. So when we're thinking about deliberate trusting relationships, this truly is a conscious decision. I'm establishing this relationship. I want to be one of trust with my students. How can I do that? And how can I help my student to succeed? So, this is what's going to lead to that positive classroom climate that we're looking at each student for what he or she needs. And this is going to get back to the heart of differentiation, looking at next steps, collecting data on students. And sorry if we don't like that word, but data is not a totally bad word, I don't think. If you are collecting data, and that might be anecdotal data, but if you're collecting data, I would say collect it and use it to decide what happens next, because data is worthless if it just sits there. So find out, and you can collect authentic data. I think the idea of all of this collecting data and analyzing it, it seems so intense and time consuming, and I am here to promise you that it does not have to be. I literally will go, and I almost have my clipboard. I have either a clipboard or a binder depending on what we're doing. Literacy time, it's my binder because that's where I keep my anecdotal notes. And then typically my clipboard is used for math when I'm collecting data then. But I'm always checking in on the goals that we have, who's meeting it, who's not, who's getting what lessons, and then, okay, right there, I can quickly see what students need what. I'll give you a very quick example. Working in writing workshop this past week on the last day, Friday, and of course, granted, this was students' first full week. So 7:55 to 2:30, they're coming from kinder last year of half days. So they're finally feeling exhausted. So granted, by Friday, perhaps I'm seeing that some of the students are beginning to lose steam. But I was able, as I go around in writing workshop, that's what I'm doing. I'm going around, I'm conferring, I'm observing, taking anecdotal notes. I was able to observe, I think, about 3 students who I saw kind of just couldn't quite figure out what they wanted to add to the writing piece or write more about. So just through that quick observation, I could use that as a formative assessment. And now I know that next week I need to work with those 3 students, and I want to work with those students on brainstorming, like, what do you do when you get stuck. Oh, I can stop, I can read my writing over again, and when I read my writing over again, that can help remind me what I was working on and give me more ideas. And I can also make a list of topics that I want to write about, and I can keep that in my writing folder, and then I can refer to that. Now, because I only really saw 3 students struggling with that, those need to be my next steps with those particular students. So you see how quick that was? It was authentic. I did not need to do anything additional than what I was already doing, except I needed to keep really good notes. I was making notation. And it's very possible that maybe I didn't see anyone struggle. But this is what I mean by collecting data. Data doesn't have to be data that was collected from an actual physical paper test, although it could be. It could be what you are collecting right then and there. So how does this fit into a positive classroom climate? Because when you're giving students what they need, of course, they're going to feel better. It's going to make them successful. And when they are successful, they feel good. So that is why differentiating and looking at next steps are going to be huge and contribute to the positive classroom climate. I would also say working with students to come up with goals, and you can do this. I have done this in writing workshop and reading workshop as a whole class, but then also one-on-one in conferring. So you can talk to them about setting goals. If you're working with really young students like I am, you're probably going to want to have a few goals listed that they can choose from. If I'm reading, maybe one of my goals is to become better at using picture power. Maybe one of my goals is to improve my persistence power. So you can talk about this as a whole group, have students choose what their goal is, and then they can maybe make a visual of it or have some kind of way to record it. And you can also do this one-on-one. So let's say your student chose a goal when you talked about a whole group, and now students have been working towards those goals. Well, you're probably not going to have a whole group lesson on that, but when you're conferring, you're going to be checking in on those kids. You're going to see how they're doing on their goals. And then once they master a goal, look at, okay, what would you like to work on now? Set a brand new goal. So that can be done whole group, but it's probably going to most times be in that conferring part. And when you're doing this, that also affirms to your student that, okay, my teacher really is concerned about me academically growing and ultimately me as a person. My teacher is supporting me. My teacher is really giving me the tools that I need. So I feel supported. I'm going to work hard. I feel good. And this is going to set your student up for success. And that leads me to another study that was done. It was a 2001 study done by Ryan and Patrick. And what they found was that the perception of the teacher as supportive was a predictor in decreased disruptive behavior. I mean, is that not our battle, teachers, when we're talking about a positive classroom climate? I don't think we can have a positive classroom climate when we have behavior issues. We just can't. So, and this is amazing, I think, when we look at this study, it was just the perception that the teacher was supportive. The perception that the teacher was supportive. Whether or not the teacher was actually supportive, which I would argue the teacher probably had to be supportive in order to be perceived to have been supportive, but it was the perception alone that decreased disruptive behavior. Again, if your students sense that you care and you care about them as a actual person and in their academics, you're going to see better behavior. There is an important note, though, that in that study, it was only found, that when the teacher was perceived as supportive, disruptive behavior decreased. That was only found, but when other variables were present. So it wasn't just that one factor, okay? So teacher support is not alone making the difference. And this is really what speaks to the complexity of a positive classroom climate. We need teacher support, but we need also mutual respect between students. So there are so many different factors. We need to give students choice. We need to give students voice. So there is a complexity. There truly is a complexity when we're talking about setting up our classrooms so that they are positive and students thrive in that environment. It is complex.
And as I suspected, I am unable to get through all of this. It's a lot of information, so there will be a part 2. I don't think it's going to be next week because I have a couple of other episodes that I'm already working on. So you will have to stay tuned for part 2. That will be coming, but it's going to be a few weeks before part 2 is here. So that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.
Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.